time would you need to be able to make an adequate decision on whether you should run or not?
We'll probably be making a decision in January or February. We're going to see what happens. The polls have come out. They've been unbelievably strong. They say I'd win.
The interesting thing about Trump is that he's been threatening to run for president for basically 25 years, all the way back to the 80s when he gave a speech in New Hampshire and saw a bunch of newspapers all over the country write stories wondering or speculating about whether he would run. This is the first time he's actually filed papers and is out on the campaign trail.
Information that was false and fake and never happened got released to the public. As far as Buzzfeed, which is a failing pile of garbage, writing it, I think they're going to suffer the consequences. They already are.
Just in the last couple of minutes, we've learned Buzzfeed has decided to shut down its newsroom.
Yeah, Jose, this is no doubt a rough day for the news business.
The website Buzzfeed News is closing down.
Adios, Buzzfeed News. The website is shuttering, according to senior news reporter Oliver Darcy over at CNN. Buzzfeed's CEO Jonah Peretti just sent out a note to staff announcing the closing of Buzzfeed News.
Glenn Greenwald tweeted, BuzzFeed News is shutting down. Company laying off 180 staffers, 15% of the staff laid off. The remainder will just be tossed under the collapsing brand of the Huffington Post. Multi-pronged disintegration of the digital liberal media.
BuzzFeed News is certainly a prestige operation, and they did great journalism. They did a lot of important investigations into Russia, big pharma, tech, and disinformation. So BuzzFeed News closing is a loss for a better informed democracy.
You fat bitch.
Donald Trump blasting CNN and BuzzFeed for publishing an unverified, unproven, and highly salacious story about him.
So the liberal alt-left media is in meltdown mode because Donald Trump put them on notice that he's not going to take their BS anymore.
As for that document published in BuzzFeed or whatever, I've seen stuff like that before in Moscow. It's junk.
And let's talk about what BuzzFeed did. You know, where I come from, you verify information before you put it out there. You don't just put it out there and basically trade in gossip.
BuzzFeed's defense, since reporters already saw this stuff, why can't you?
So BuzzFeed News closing is a loss for a better informed democracy.
So the media, they're pretending to be shocked that the president-elect slammed BuzzFeed over publishing an unconfirmed, completely unfounded political op research file on President-elect Trump.
Right? We're not supposed to put anything out there that we know to be untrue or that we don't feel solid about. If we knowingly put something out there in the news that we are unsure of, then that's malice, right? That's the grounds for libel. That's what we're not supposed to do. That's what the law tells us affirmatively that we can't do.
BuzzFeed was correct to publish the 35-page dossier with all sorts of allegations about Donald Trump and Russia and all sorts of other stuff.
BuzzFeed did report this. None of the allegations in these leaked documents or the leaked document have been verified. No one has corroborated them. They even said themselves that it's potentially unverifiable.
It's scuttlebutt, it's rumor. It's generated by so-called private intelligence agents who are out to make a buck. They'll sell it to anybody.
Gossip, fake news, call it whatever you want, but there's a certain responsibility that you should bring to the table as a journalist. And yeah, sure, you may have an opinion, you may have a viewpoint on things, but at least your information, Dan Gaynor, should be authentic.
None of it was verified because fact-checking is hard, and BuzzFeed is too busy finding pictures of melons that look like Kim Kardashian's ass. 2, it was opposition research, not intel, meaning it was meant to be titillating, like a BuzzFeed article featuring melons that look like Kim Kardashian's ass. Number 3, the disinformation had been around forever and no one touched it. It was like the last hot dog at 7-Eleven.
I believe that given the circumstances, BuzzFeed was right to release the documents with the caveats that they included in their release, that the information itself has not been verified, but that this is a document about which briefings have taken place at the highest level.
I mean, you know, to call this legitimate journalism, this is like calling dog food filet mignon.
Now, it's nothing more, BuzzFeed, but a political propaganda arm of the Democratic Party. And here's why. In June, the website terminated an advertising deal with the RNC because, as their CEO said in part in a statement, quote, the Trump campaign is directly opposed to the freedoms of our employees in the United States and the world.
The BuzzFeed piece, and maybe equally as bad, the coverage of the BuzzFeed phony story. It was a total phony story.
Actually openly said in the story, we have doubts about the veracity of this material, but we're going to put it out there anyway. And so now what does everybody do? You can't put the genie back in the bottle. Now it's a news story. It's a phenomenon that everybody's talking about.
Were the allegations against Hillary Clinton and her allies in the so-called email scandal verified before they were released? No.
See, Hillary's emails, not a single one was proven wrong. Not one. And so, by the way, lots of news organizations passed on it. But when this is proved totally false, not one person is saying this is true. There's not one person to stand up and say this is true, including the man who purportedly wrote it.
So it should be no surprise that BuzzFeed and CNN and all these other people, in the case of BuzzFeed, the editor-in-chief Ben Smith, are standing by the decision to publish what amounts to fake news, all in an attempt to smear the president-elect Donald Trump.
But the question is what is it doing in our political discourse? What are the motives? I mean, why'd CNN put it on the air? Why is the FBI and the CIA even touching this stuff? Something's going on. I mean, I've been doing this, studying Russia as a professor, and sometimes even on the inside for more than 40 years. I've never seen anything like this.
What's shocking to me is this entire story, Joe, has completely fallen apart, as we all knew that it would. It was largely built upon a falsehood, on lies, and I think it's been relative silence from the mainstream media about this revelation.
The mainstream media has lost its credibility, and that's a very bad thing for our country.
BuzzFeed never, ever would have published this if it were about Obama. Number 6, BuzzFeed never, ever would have published this if it were about Obama. Number 7, BuzzFeed never would have published this if it were about Obama. I needed to get to 7, but I ran out at number 5.
The damage is done. A presidential election was swung. Rachel Maddow showered with between $20 and $30 million, awarded themselves Pulitzers based upon a complete fake story.
So BuzzFeed News closing is a loss for a better informed democracy.
The news outlet BuzzFeed says the U.S. president directed his former personal lawyer to lie to Congress. But a spokesperson for Robert Mueller's probe says the BuzzFeed story is not accurate.